Welcome back to the AI Videos 2.0, where we uncover the darkest stories hidden in the shadows of seemingly ordinary lives. Today, we dive into a case that will make you question the very foundations of what we call family. This is the macabre history of the Follings, a couple who adopted 12 children over the span of 15 years, none of whom had birth certificates. What began as a heartwarming story of generosity quickly unraveled into something far more sinister. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to the AI Videos 2.0 and turn on notifications so you never miss our weekly descent into the darkest corners of human history. Now, let's begin. The small town of Millbrook, nestled in the rolling hills of western Pennsylvania, was hardly the kind of place you'd expect to find a story so disturbing that it would eventually attract the attention of federal investigators. With a population of just under 3,000 people, Millbrook was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where community potlucks and high school football games were the highlights of the social calendar, and where neighbors still brought casseroles when someone fell ill. It was in this idyllic setting that Howard and Margaret Folling made their home in the spring of 1978. The Follings' residence was a sprawling Victorian mansion on Elm Street, set back from the road and partially hidden by a copse of ancient oak trees. The house had been vacant for nearly a decade before the Follings purchased it, and the locals had begun to call it the haunted house on the hill. But Howard Folling, a successful investment banker from Pittsburgh, saw potential in the dilapidated structure. He and his wife Margaret, a former pediatric nurse, spent a small fortune renovating the property, transforming it from a crumbling eyesore into the envy of the neighborhood. They seemed like such a lovely couple, recalls Elaine Winters, who lived across the street from the Follings for nearly 20 years. Howard was always impeccably dressed, even when he was just checking the mail. And Margaret, well, she had this way about her, so poised, so elegant. They were the kind of people you'd want to invite to dinner, you know, the kind of people who made you feel important just by talking to you. But beneath the veneer of respectability, the Follings harbored secrets that would eventually shock the entire community. According to public records, Howard and Margaret Folling were unable to have biological children of their own. This was a source of great sorrow for Margaret, who always dreamed of having a large family. She used to watch the neighborhood children playing from her porch, says Winters. There was something so sad about it, the way she'd just sit there for hours watching them laugh and run around. I remember thinking at the time that she would have made a wonderful mother. And indeed, it seemed that Margaret would finally get her chance at motherhood when in the summer of 1980, the Follings announced that they had adopted a baby boy whom they named James. The community was thrilled for them. Neighbors organized a surprise baby shower, and the local church held a special blessing ceremony for the new family. James Folling was a beautiful child, bright-eyed and quick to smile, and the Follings doted on him obsessively. Margaret wouldn't let anyone else hold him, remembers Clara Jenkins, who attended the same church as the Follings, not even at his blessing ceremony. When the pastor asked to hold him for the blessing, she got this look on her face like a cornered animal. Howard had to whisper something to her before she'd hand him over, and even then she stood so close to Pastor Williams that she was practically breathing down his neck. In retrospect, This possessiveness might have been the first red flag, but at the time it was easily dismissed as the natural protectiveness of a new mother, especially one who had waited so long to have a child. Within 2 years, the Follings had adopted a second child, a girl they named Elizabeth. And then, in rapid succession, came Thomas, Catherine, and William. By 1985, the Follings had 5 adopted children, all under the age of 6. The speed with which they were able to adopt was unusual, especially given the typically lengthy adoption process in Pennsylvania at that time. But Howard Folling was wealthy and well-connected, and the couple had an impeccable reputation in the community. They were seen as saviors, says Detective Richard Cooper, who would later lead the investigation into the Folling family. Here was this wealthy couple taking in children who might otherwise have grown up in the system. Who was going to question that? Who would want to? But there were oddities that, in hindsight, should have raised concerns. None of the Folling children attended public school. Margaret insisted on homeschooling them. The children were rarely seen in town, and when they were never allowed to stray far from their parents' sides. They didn't participate in sports or extracurricular activities, and they had no friends outside the family. I remember trying to arrange a play date for my son with James Folling. They were about the same age, and James seemed so lonely. But Margaret always had an excuse. James was ill, or he had too much schoolwork, or they were planning a family trip. After a while, I stopped asking. The isolation of the Folling children might have continued indefinitely, if not for an accident that occurred in the summer of 1987. 9-year-old Thomas Folling fell from a tree in the family's yard and broke his arm. Margaret, despite her background as a nurse, didn't take him to the hospital. Instead, she attempted to set the bone herself, resulting in a compound fracture that became infected. It was only when Thomas developed a dangerously high fever that Howard finally overruled his wife and took the boy to the emergency room. Dr. Sarah Chen was the attending physician at Millbrook General Hospital when Thomas was brought in. The child was in septic shock by the time he arrived, Dr. Chen recalls. We had to perform emergency surgery to save his arm, and even then there was significant nerve damage. What struck me most, though, was the boy's reaction. He didn't cry not once during the entire ordeal. And when I asked him how he'd broken his arm, he looked at his father before answering. It was as if he was waiting for permission to speak. Dr. Chen's concerns deepened when she asked for Thomas's medical records and was told that they didn't exist. According to Howard Folling, all of the children's records had been lost in a fire at their previous adoption agency. When Dr. Chen pressed for more information, Howard became agitated and threatened to transfer Thomas to another hospital. That's when I knew something was wrong, says Dr. Chen, but I had no proof, only suspicions. And in a town like Millbrook, suspicions about a family like the Follings could damage your career. Nevertheless, Dr. Chen filed a report with Child Protective Services expressing her concerns about potential medical neglect. A caseworker named David Morris was assigned to investigate. Morris visited the Folling home, interviewed the parents, and observed the children. His report, filed 3 weeks later, concluded that there was no evidence of abuse or neglect. The children appeared healthy and well cared for, Morris wrote. The home environment is clean and safe. Mrs. Folling explained that she initially tried to treat Thomas's injury herself due to her medical background and a fear of hospitals stemming from her own childhood experiences. While this decision was ill-advised, it does not constitute willful neglect. The case was closed, and life in Millbrook returned to normal. The Follings continued to expand their family, adopting 3 more children between 1988 and 1990: Robert, Anne, and Henry. By now, some in the community were beginning to whisper about the unusual family on Elm Street. How were they able to adopt so many children so quickly? Why were the children so rarely seen in public? And why did they all share the same vacant expression, as if something vital had been drained from them? "I used to watch them at church," says Jenkins. 8 children, all sitting in a perfect row, not fidgeting, not whispering, not doing any of the things that normal children do during a long service. They just sat there, staring straight ahead. It was unnatural.